It was a quiet Thursday night in the suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates, a peaceful-looking community on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. At 9:47 p.m., the streets were empty, the distant hum of crickets blending with the faint rustle of trees swaying under a soft summer breeze. Inside Jason Miller's two-story home at 2147 Maplewood Drive, everything seemed normal. The lights in the living room glowed softly, and the low murmur of a late-night news broadcast filled the silence. Jason had just settled on the couch with a glass of water when something unusual caught his attention. Headlights creeping slowly past his house. He glanced out the window and frowned. A black Chevy Tahoe rolled to a stop across the street, its tinted windows hiding the occupants inside. Then, without warning, two men stepped out. At first glance, they looked official dark navy uniforms, tactical boots, badges pinned to their chests, and radios clipped to their belts. Their movements were sharp, precise, confident. Almost too confident. Jason felt his gut tighten. He leaned slightly toward the blinds, careful not to draw attention to himself. The men walked with purpose, their flashlights cutting clean beams of white light across his driveway. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with a close-shaved head, glanced at the house and muttered something to the shorter man beside him. Jason couldn't hear what they said, but their pace quickened. And then it happened, a loud, authoritative knock on the front door. Bang, bang, bang. "Austin Police Department," a deep voice barked. "Open the door immediately." Jason froze. His mind scrambled to make sense of the situation. Police? At this hour? There hadn't been any disturbance, no alarms, nothing. He cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole, his breathing shallow and uneven. The two men stood stiffly on the porch, one holding a clipboard, the other resting his hand near his belt close to what looked like a holstered weapon. Something wasn't right. Jason knew the Austin PD uniforms well. These weren't them. The shade of blue was off, the patches looked generic, and the badges had an odd metallic shine that didn't match the usual department-issued designs. But before he could think further, one of the men knocked again, harder this time. Bang, bang, bang. "Sir, we've received multiple HOA complaints about your property. We need to conduct an inspection right now." Jason's jaw clenched. The Willow Creek HOA. Of course. For the past 6 months, they'd been relentless harassing him with notices about his non-compliant mailbox color, threatening fines over his backyard fence, even accusing him of having illegal landscaping. It had started with letters, then phone calls, and now, cops? No, he thought, not cops. He stayed silent, pressing his back against the wall, forcing himself to breathe slowly. That's when his phone buzzed. A text popped up from his next-door neighbor, Sarah Whitman. "Jason, are those real cops? Their SUV doesn't have any decals. I'm watching from my window. Something feels off." His throat went dry. Sarah was right. He crept toward the side window, pulling the curtain back just an inch, and that's when his suspicions solidified into fear. The Tahoe parked outside had cheap LED strobes clipped inside the windshield, flashing blue and red, but there were no department markings, no official plates, no numbers. It wasn't a police cruiser. It was a civilian vehicle pretending to be one. Jason's pulse pounded in his ears. Another message came in, this time from Mark, the neighbor across the street. "Recording this. Those guys don't look legit. Be careful." Jason took one slow step back from the window. He had two choices: confront them or stay quiet. But before he could decide, the taller man outside barked again, louder this time. "Sir, if you don't open the door, we'll have to enter by force." A cold chill shot down his spine. Real cops don't say that without a warrant. Real cops don't threaten forced entry during HOA inspections. He knew now. They weren't police officers at all. He crouched low, holding his breath, listening. One of the men walked toward the side of the house, his boots crunching against the gravel, while the other stayed near the front door, tapping something into his phone. Jason could hear faint whispers too low to make out the words, but tense, urgent. Then came the unmistakable metallic clink of his side gate latch. They were circling the house. Jason's hands trembled as he gripped his phone tighter, scrolling quickly to his contacts. His thumb hovered over the emergency dial button, but he hesitated for one brief, dangerous moment. What if he was wrong? What if somehow these were undercover officers working with the HOA? Calling the real police could make things messy. But then, just as doubt crept in, a voice outside shattered it. "Call him. Tell him to open the door or we'll handle it ourselves," the taller man hissed. Jason's chest constricted. His breathing grew shallow. He dropped lower, hiding behind the couch now, trying to make himself invisible as his mind raced for a plan. Across the street, Sarah sent another text. "Jason, they just talked to someone in a black hoodie standing near the SUV. Looks like a third guy's involved. 3 men, 1 vehicle, fake cops, coordinated." This wasn't a simple scare tactic anymore. This was deliberate. Jason's decision came in a heartbeat. He couldn't afford to wait, couldn't gamble with what they might do next. His finger pressed firmly on the phone screen. 911. The line clicked, and a calm voice answered. 911. What's your emergency? Jason swallowed hard, his whispers sharp and urgent. My name is Jason Miller. I live at 2147 Maplewood Drive, Willow Creek Estates. There are 2 men outside dressed as police officers. They're not real. I think the HOA sent them. I need backup immediately. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly, her voice firm and precise. Stay inside, Jason. Lock every door and window. Do not engage. Real officers are on their way. For the first time all night, a flicker of relief cut through the fear. But it didn't last. Because outside, the fake cops weren't leaving. They were moving faster now. Oh, and Jason knew deep down, this was only the beginning. The chaos outside Jason's house that night didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for months quietly, deliberately, until finally exploding into something far darker than he ever imagined. When Jason first moved into Willow Creek Estates 3 years ago, the neighborhood looked like paradise. Perfectly lined sidewalks, neatly trimmed lawns, and rows of identical mailboxes painted the same dull beige. It was the kind of place where families waved to each other from their driveways and kids rode their bikes without worry. But behind the white picket fences and friendly smiles, there was something else, something controlling. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association wasn't just strict, it was ruthless. At first, Jason didn't think much of it. A couple of notices here and there about keeping his grass trimmed or making sure his trash bins were stored properly. Annoying, but harmless. Then came the first real problem. One afternoon about 9 months ago, Jason received a thick envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a notice of violation, accusing him of making unauthorized modifications to his property. The supposed violation? Repainting his backyard fence. Jason stared at the paper in disbelief. The fence wasn't even visible from the street, and his color choice, a soft cedar brown, matched nearly every other backyard fence in the neighborhood. He called the HOA office expecting a reasonable conversation. It was anything but. "Sir," said Karen Whitfield, the HOA's board president, her tone sharp and cold, "your modifications violate community guidelines. You're required to restore the original color or face a $500 fine." Jason tried to reason with her, explaining that the paint he used was identical to the approved shade. But Karen cut him off, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You chose to live here, Mr. Miller. That means you follow our rules. If you can't, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." That was the moment Jason realized something important. This wasn't about rules, it was about power. Over the next few months, the notices started stacking up like clockwork. First the fence, then his mailbox color, then his driveway lights, even the placement of his trash cans. Each letter carried a threat of fines, and when he refused to comply with some of their unreasonable demands, things escalated. At first it was subtle. HOA board members parked outside his house longer than usual, pretending to check landscaping. He caught one of them taking pictures of his backyard through a gap in the fence. Then came the late-night phone calls, unknown numbers, never leaving a message. And then there was the strange letter. 2 months ago, Jason received an official-looking notice from what claimed to be the City of Austin's Code Enforcement Division. It warned of serious violations on his property and threatened legal action if he didn't comply. Alarmed, Jason called the city directly. That's when he learned the letter was fake. The city had no record of any complaints, no pending inspections, nothing. Someone had forged the document, and Jason didn't have to think long about who was behind it. It was the HOA. That was the moment Jason stopped ignoring the problem. He started keeping records, every email, every letter, every voicemail. He installed 3 Arlo security cameras around the property, capturing every car that slowed down near his house, every stranger who walked by. It didn't take long for him to notice a pattern. A black Chevy Tahoe with tinted windows, the same one parked outside his house on the night of the fake cops, kept appearing in his recordings. At first, it drove by slowly, like any other passing car. But as weeks went by, it started stopping, idling, waiting. He brought it up at the next HOA meeting, standing in the crowded community center with his laptop in hand. "Why is there a Tahoe circling my house every other night?" Jason demanded, playing the footage for everyone to see. Karen Whitfield smiled a sharp, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said smoothly, "but maybe if you weren't constantly violating our community rules, no one would need to keep an eye on you." Her words weren't just dismissive, they were a warning. Jason left that meeting with a sinking feeling in his stomach. Something had shifted. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. They were targeting him. And then the intimidation ramped up. A week before the night of the fake police, Jason woke up to find a bright orange final warning notice taped to his front door. The paper was stamped with bold, black letters. "Failure to comply may result in law enforcement intervention." He laughed bitterly when he first read it, tossing the paper onto his kitchen counter. Law enforcement intervention? Over a mailbox? He thought they were bluffing. But now, standing in his darkened living room, watching 2 men in fake uniforms circle his property, he realized they weren't bluffing at all. That night, as the men pounded on his door, Jason pieced it all together. The endless notices, the fake city letter, the Tahoe parked outside his house for weeks, the HOA meetings filled with veiled threats. This wasn't random harassment. This was a planned operation. And the deeper realization hit him like ice water. The HOA had finally decided to scare him into submission by making him believe the police were involved. Across the street, Sarah sent him another text, her panic creeping through the words. "Walk toward your backyard.
One of the guys
I'm on my porch. They're checking your gate. This doesn't look right at all." Jason crouched low, his phone shaking in his hand. Every instinct screamed at him to stay quiet, but his pulse thundered in his ears. That's when he saw the shadow moving past his kitchen window, tall, broad, and deliberate. The beam of a flashlight swept across the curtains, landing dangerously close to where he crouched. And just as he leaned back against the wall, he heard one of the men outside speaking to his radio. "He's inside. Doesn't want to open. HOA says we push harder." Jason's blood ran cold. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was escalation. Jason crouched on the living room floor, his breath shallow, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound inside the house. Outside, the crickets chirped in the humid Texas night, but their rhythm was broken by the crunch of heavy boots on gravel. From across the street, Sarah's porch light flicked on. She stood half hidden behind a pillar, phone raised, her other hand trembling as she zoomed in to record. Jason's phone buzzed in his pocket, another message from her. "Jason, one of them just went around the side. He's near your backyard gate. This isn't normal. Real cops don't sneak like this." Jason's chest tightened. He dared a glance through the blinds, just enough to catch the edge of the black Chevy Tahoe parked crookedly by the curb, its headlights off, its tinted windows reflecting nothing but shadows. The 2 men in fake police uniforms were moving with precision, deliberate, silent, practiced. The taller one, bald with a sharp jawline, lifted his radio to his mouth. Jason strained to hear through the glass. "He's inside. Lights are off. HOA says we're clear to proceed." Jason froze. That single word, HOA, hit him like a hammer. This wasn't random intimidation anymore. This was sanctioned. Across the street, Sarah whispered frantically into her phone, connecting with Mark, Jason's closest friend, who lived 3 houses down. Within seconds, Mark was jogging barefoot across his lawn, ducking low to stay out of sight, his own phone pressed to his ear as he called 911. Inside, Jason crawled to the kitchen and reached for the drawer beneath the counter, where he kept his Glock 43. His fingers trembled as he slid safety off. He had never drawn it in his life, but tonight felt different. The pounding started again, louder this time, shaking the front door. "Open up! Austin Police! You're under investigation for property violations." Jason's stomach twisted. Property violations? That was never how police announced themselves. "Badge numbers," Jason shouted back, forcing his voice to sound steady. "Read me your badge numbers right now." A pause. No response. Instead, the shorter man stepped off the porch, muttering something into his radio. Jason caught only fragments. "Backyard. Camera blind spot. Push now before neighbors." He sprinted to the rear window and saw the flashlight beams slice through the darkness, bobbing steadily as one of them moved toward his back fence. "From her porch," Sarah whispered into her phone again, her voice shaking. "Jason, I'm recording everything. I've got their faces, the car, the plates, everything. Don't open that door. The real cops are on their way." Inside Jason's living room, the air felt thick, charged. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. His cameras, the 3 Arlos mounted discreetly along the eaves, tracked the men's every move. On his phone, the live feed showed one man crouching by the side gate, the others scanning the front yard, eyes darting between houses. Then it happened. The taller man pulled something from his belt. Not a police-issued tool, but a bolt cutter. Jason's breath caught. He watched the man position it against the latch of his backyard gate. The metallic snap echoed faintly through the night. Jason's hands tightened around the grip of his Glock. Every instinct screamed at him to stay quiet, stay hidden. But another voice, deeper, angrier, louder, whispered that this wasn't just about harassment anymore. This was an invasion. Mark's voice came faintly through Jason's earpiece on speakerphone. "Jason, I'm talking to 911 right now. They're dispatching a real unit. Whatever you do, don't engage. Just hold out." Jason clenched his jaw, watching the back gate slowly creak open. Suddenly, the sound of crunching gravel from the driveway made his stomach drop. The second man was circling to the rear, meeting his partner. 2 shadows merged into one long, shifting silhouette beneath the pale glow of the backyard's security light. And then, for the first time, Jason saw one of their faces clearly. Not a cop. Not even close. The shorter man, barely in his mid-30s, had a familiar scar along his jawline. Jason recognized him from the last HOA meeting. His name was Derek Sloan, one of Karen Whitfield's most loyal enforcers. Jason's entire body went cold. This was no misunderstanding. Karen hadn't just been threatening him, she'd sent them. Before he could react, Derek whispered sharply, "Grab the handle. Push him when he comes through. Don't let him record." Jason's mind spun. Record what? What were they trying to hide? Suddenly, one of Jason's cameras beeped softly. The motion alert pinged his phone. A third figure had appeared on the sidewalk just past the Tahoe. Another shadow. And then another. 2 more men in black hoodies were approaching, silent and swift, their faces hidden, their movements coordinated. 4 against 1. Jason's grip on the Glock tightened, his knuckles white. Across the street, Sarah's breath caught as she zoomed her camera closer, whispering into her mic for the recording. "Oh my God, they're not cops. None of them are cops. This is a setup. This is the HOA." The taller fake officer turned his head sharply toward her, catching the faint glint of her phone in the dark. For one tense, unbearable second, Jason thought he was about to cross the street toward her. But instead, the man leaned into his radio and hissed, "We've been made. Move now." In an instant, chaos erupted. The 2 men in fake uniforms vaulted the gate, boots slamming against Jason's deck. The hooded figures broke into a sprint, circling around the house. Sarah's shaky whisper became a choked gasp, her camera shaking violently, as she ducked back behind her porch column. Inside the house, Jason's world slowed. The creak of the gate, the scrape of boots, the muffled voices outside, and then a heavy thud against his back door. They were inside the fence, and they weren't leaving without making their point. Jason exhaled shakily, whispering to himself, "Not tonight." His finger hovered over the emergency button on his phone, the panic alarm connected directly to the security company. Outside, the fake cops lined up on his back deck, Derek whispering instructions to the others. One of them reached into his vest pocket and pulled out zip ties. Jason's chest tightened. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was preparation. And somewhere deep down, he realized the horrifying truth. The HOA didn't just want compliance. They wanted control. Jason's entire body was trembling, but his mind had gone cold, hyper-focused. Outside, 4 men were circling his home, their boots thudding softly against the grass and deck. From the kitchen window, he could see Derek Sloan and the tall, bald enforcer crouched by the sliding glass door, their whispers sharp and urgent. "On my count," Derek hissed. "We go in fast, no talking. Get the files, wipe the drives, and make sure he signs the release." "Files? Release?" Jason's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break his ribs. He crouched behind the kitchen island, Glock raised, his other hand clutching his phone. The emergency panic button glowed faintly on the screen. One tap, and the alarm company would trigger every siren on the property. Across the street, Sarah's hands were shaking so badly her phone footage blurred, but she didn't dare stop recording. Every detail mattered now. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Come on, come on. Where are the real cops?" Jason checked his cameras again. 2 hooded men had taken positions along the side wall, their black gloves reflecting faint bits of moonlight. They were coordinated, trained. This wasn't amateur harassment. This was an operation. Suddenly, Derek raised his hand, a silent signal. And then the sound Jason dreaded most. The click of the sliding door lock being lifted. Jason tensed, finger hovering over the trigger, sweat dripping down his temple. "Ah!" But before Derek could open the door, a deafening blast of sound shattered the night. Where? Jason had slammed the panic button. In an instant, his house roared to life. Floodlights exploding across the yard, sirens wailing from hidden speakers, cameras flashing as they auto-captured every face in sight. Chaos erupted. The hooded men dove for cover behind the side wall. Derek cursed loudly, motioning for everyone to retreat. But before they could regroup, Sarah's voice cut through the night. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. "They're not cops! I'm recording everything!" One of the fake officers spun toward her, rage flashing across his face. "Grab the phone!" he shouted. Jason's chest tightened as he watched 2 men break off toward Sarah's porch. No, he couldn't let them reach her. He darted across the living room, flung open the front door, and leveled his Glock at the ground, shouting with everything in him, "Back off! The real cops are coming!" The sound of his voice, sharp, commanding, unbroken, stunned them for a second. Just enough time. From the end of the street came the faint but unmistakable wail of sirens. Real ones this time. Red and blue lights splashed across the rooftops, growing brighter with each passing second. "Abort!" Derek barked, his voice cracking under pressure. "Everybody out, now!" The 4 men bolted, sprinting toward the black Tahoe parked at the curb. Sarah, still recording, zoomed in on the license plate as they peeled away. Jason lowered his gun slowly, his chest heaving, adrenaline burning through his veins. Within seconds, 2 Austin police cruisers screeched to a stop in front of Jason's house. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, scanning the street for threats. Jason raised his hands, shouting, "Inside! They went that way! Tahoe black, tinted windows, plates ending in 71K. The nearest officer nodded sharply, relaying the description into his radio as the cruisers took off in pursuit. But not all of them left. 2 officers stayed behind, weapons still at the ready. One of them approached Jason cautiously. "You okay, sir?" the officer asked, his voice firm but steady. Jason nodded, his breathing still ragged. They weren't cops. They were HOA, at least one of them. Derek Sloan. He tried to break in. The officer's expression shifted recognition, mixed with something darker. Derek Sloan, he repeated under his breath. He's been on our radar. You're not the first person in this neighborhood to report intimidation tactics. Jason's stomach turned. What do you mean? The officer hesitated, glancing back toward his partner. You should come down to the station tomorrow. There are ongoing investigations into several HOA board members. It's bigger than you think. Before Jason could respond, Sarah ran across the street, still holding her phone, her voice shaky but determined. I have everything, she said, shoving the recording toward the officer. Faces, voices, license plates. You need to see this. The officer took the phone carefully, scanning a few seconds of footage before nodding. This helps. A lot. Jason leaned against the porch column, trying to steady his breathing, but something gnawed at him, something the officer had said. Bigger than you think, the phrase rattled in his skull. The next morning, Jason sat in the police station conference room, Sarah by his side. Across the table, Detective Ramirez slid a manila folder toward him. Inside were photos, grainy surveillance shots of people Jason recognized instantly. Derek Sloan, the tall, bald enforcer, and at the center of every single photo, Karen Whitfield. Jason's jaw tightened. I knew it, but the detective shook his head. You don't know the half of it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Karen isn't just the HOA president. She's under investigation for racketeering, property fraud, and organized harassment. We've been building a case for 6 months, and last night, thanks to you and your neighbor, we finally have probable cause. Jason blinked, stunned into silence. Sarah's hand gripped his arm, her breath catching. You mean, Jason whispered. Ramirez nodded grimly. Yes, we're preparing to issue arrest warrants. Jason sat back in his chair, heart pounding, relief and dread swirling together like a storm. For the first time in months, he felt hope. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Because Karen Whitfield wasn't the kind of woman to go down quietly. Somewhere in the shadows of Oak Ridge Estates, the HOA queenpin was already planning her next move. And this time, she wouldn't send fake cops. She'd send killers. Jason thought the nightmare was over, but Oak Ridge Estates had other plans for him. After the arrests and the chaos with the fake cops, he finally believed peace was returning. That illusion shattered quickly. One evening, while reviewing security footage for Detective Ramirez, Sarah showed up at his door holding 2 mugs of coffee. Her face carried a tension Jason hadn't seen before. She told him her cousin, who worked at the courthouse, had overheard something troubling. Karen's lawyer had filed an emergency injunction to stall her arrest. That wasn't unusual on its own, but the whispers about Karen making phone calls to people out of state, dangerous people, sent a chill down Jason's spine. The next morning, Detective Ramirez called. His voice was sharp, stripped of his usual calm. Karen was gone. Her house had been emptied overnight, her phones dead, her accounts drained. Jason's stomach knotted as Ramirez warned him to stay alert. They'd pulled data from Derek Sloan's phone, the HOA's so-called security chief, and found a group chat where Karen mentioned Jason by name. But this time, it wasn't about forcing him to sell or filing lawsuits. It was about retaliation. Jason doubled his security, immediately reinforced locks, new motion sensors, hidden cameras across his property. He even warned Sarah to stay indoors after dark. But that same night, she texted him in panic, asking him to step outside. Jason walked onto his porch and froze. Across Sarah's garage door, someone had spray-painted "Enemy of Oak Ridge" in thick red letters, dripping like blood. As he stood there, his phone buzzed. A blocked number. Against his instincts, he answered. "Cute cameras, Jason." Karen's voice purred from the other end, venomous and mocking. "Do you really think little lights and sirens can save you?" Jason gritted his teeth. "It's over, Karen. The police are coming for you." Her laugh was soft, terrifying. "Oh, sweetheart, you still don't get it, do you? The cops aren't your friends. They're mine. And when I'm done, you'll wish you'd left when I told you to." The line went dead. From that moment on, Oak Ridge felt wrong. The air was heavier. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Cars slowed when they passed Jason's home, their drivers pretending not to stare. By the next afternoon, Detective Ramirez showed up, his expression darker than Jason had ever seen it. Someone inside the department, Ramirez admitted, was leaking information to Karen. She had known about the arrest warrants before they were even filed. There was a mole, and it was someone close. Before Jason could process it, Sarah burst into the room, pale and shaking, her phone trembling in her hand. "She knows," she whispered. "Karen knows about the recordings." Jason's chest tightened. Sarah's hidden videos, the footage exposing Karen's plan to fake HOA police authority, were their strongest evidence. "How could she possibly know?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Sarah hesitated, her eyes glassy with guilt. "Because my brother told her." Jason stared at her, unblinking. "Your brother?" She nodded slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "He's been working for her the whole time. He told her about the recordings, about Ramirez, about everything." Jason felt the floor beneath him give way. All the security upgrades, all the precautions useless. Every move he'd made had been fed straight back to Karen. That night, Jason barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside made his nerves spike. Just before dawn, his phone buzzed again. No name, just a location pin dropped deep inside the wooded trails behind Oak Ridge. Underneath the pin, a single message. "Come alone if you want this to end." Jason sat in silence, the glow of his phone lighting his tense expression. His gut screamed trap. But if there was any chance of ending this war without more chaos, he had to go. He stood, walked to his safe, and pulled out his firearm. His breathing slowed, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He strapped on his holster, checked the chamber, and glanced out the window toward the dark forest in the distance. If Karen wanted to play games, he was ready. But deep down, Jason knew once he stepped into those woods, there was no going back. The woods behind Oak Ridge Estates were silent, the kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes every breath feel heavier. Jason stood at the edge of the trail, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The cool night air stung his face, but his hands were steady as he adjusted the gripless Glock. The message burned in his mind. "Come alone if you want this to end." He parked his truck 3 blocks away, leaving no trail, no headlights. Nothing to warn whoever was waiting that he was coming. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he couldn't. Karen had crossed too many lines. If there was even a slight chance she'd try another ambush or, worse, drag someone else into her schemes, Jason needed to know. As he moved deeper into the woods, his flashlight cut through the darkness in sharp, narrow beams. Twigs cracked under his boots, and the distant hoot of an owl was the only sound breaking the tension. Jason's senses were on overdrive, scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. Then he heard it faint murmurs, male voices, maybe 2 or 3 coming from up ahead. He crouched behind a fallen log, lowering his breathing, straining to listen. "He'll be here, just like she said," one voice whispered. Another replied, "Don't miss this time. No screw-ups." Jason's jaw clenched. It wasn't just Karen. She had men waiting. Slowly, he pulled his phone from his pocket and typed a quick message to Detective Ramirez. "Jason, trap, backwoods, Ridge Trail. Send backup, now." Before he could hit send, a branch cracked somewhere behind him. Jason spun around, gun raised, heart pounding. A dark figure stood about 30 feet away, hands raised halfway. "Jason, wait!" the voice hissed. Jason narrowed his eyes as the figure stepped into the dim beam of his flashlight. It was Sarah. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jason whispered harshly, lowering his weapon slightly. Her breath came in ragged gasps, eyes wide with fear. "I had to warn you," she said, voice trembling. "My brother. He called me. Karen's setting you up." She has someone inside the police department feeding her everything. They know Ramirez is suspicious. They know he's helping you." Jason froze. "You shouldn't be here, Sarah. This isn't safe." She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I couldn't just stay home knowing what's waiting for you. You don't understand, Jason. This isn't just Karen anymore. There's someone bigger behind her. Someone financing all of this." Before Jason could respond, headlights flared in the distance, cutting through the trees like a blade. A black SUV rolled slowly down the narrow dirt trail, tires crunching against gravel. Its windows were tinted so dark it looked like a moving shadow. Jason grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her behind a thick oak tree. The SUV stopped about 30 feet ahead, its engine humming softly. The rear door opened, and out stepped Karen. She wasn't dressed like the HOA president anymore. No floral dresses, no cheap pearls. Tonight she wore all black boots, leather jacket, gloves. Her hair was tied back tightly, and there was nothing friendly in her expression. "You're late, Jason," she called out softly, her voice slicing through the cold air. "Step out. Let's finish this." Jason stayed silent, his hand tightening around his gun. Karen smiled faintly and gestured with her hand. From the SUV, two men emerged, dressed in dark tactical gear, holding what Jason instantly recognized as suppressed rifles. These weren't random thugs. These were professionals. Sarah's breathing quickened, and Jason squeezed her hand gently, signaling her to stay quiet. "Jason," Karen continued, her tone calm, mocking, "I know you're out there, and I know you called Ramirez. That was cute, by the way, really, but he won't make it here. My friends made sure of that." Jason's blood ran cold. If she had someone inside the department, Ramirez could be walking straight into an ambush. Karen stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Last chance. You walk away from Oak Ridge tonight, and this all goes away. No lawsuits, no cops, no HOA drama. You keep your little house, you keep your peace. But if you stay, I promise you, Jason, you won't survive what comes next." Jason's mind raced. He had two options: confront her now or retreat and regroup. But before he could decide, Sarah's phone buzzed softly in her pocket, the vibration loud in the tense silence. Karen's head snapped toward the sound instantly. "Got you," she whispered. The two armed men raised their rifles, scanning the trees, moving in Jason's direction. Jason grabbed Sarah and rolled them both behind the oak just as a silent shot thudded into the bark above his head. The forest erupted into chaos, muffled gunfire, shouting. Karen screaming commands. Jason returned fire, forcing the men to take cover behind the SUV. Sarah crouched low, covering her ears, as bullets shredded the branches overhead. And then, just when Jason thought he was outnumbered, distant sirens pierced the silence. Blue and red lights flickered faintly through the trees. Karen's head snapped toward the sound, fury flashing in her eyes. "This isn't over," she yelled, signaling to her men. Within seconds, the SUV roared back to life, tires spitting gravel as it disappeared into the night. Jason didn't move until the lights of Ramirez's cruiser cut through the woods. He lowered his weapon slowly, chest heaving, Sarah clinging to his arm. Ramirez sprinted up the trail, his gun drawn, scanning the area. "You okay?" He demanded. Jason nodded, still catching his breath. "For now, but she's not running anymore, Detective. She's hunting." Ramirez's face darkened. "Then we hunt her back." Jason glanced at Sarah, then at the empty trail where Karen had vanished. He knew deep down this wasn't the end. It was just the opening move of a much bigger game. And this time, Oak Ridge wasn't the only battleground. Rain hammered against the cracked asphalt as Jason's truck tore down Ridgeview Road, wipers slapping wildly, tires skidding on every sharp curve. The clock on the dashboard blinked 2:14 a.m., but sleep was the last thing on his mind. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Karen was gone. The black SUV had vanished into the woods. And yet Jason couldn't shake the gnawing feeling crawling up his spine. This wasn't just about her anymore. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around herself, silent since they'd left the trail. Her face was pale, her eyes distant, replaying every moment of the ambush. The faint bruises on her wrist where Jason had pulled her to safety were already blooming purple. Jason's phone buzzed violently on the dashboard. He snatched it up and saw Detective Ramirez's name flash across the screen. He answered without hesitation. "Talk to me," Jason said, voice low and clipped. "We ran the plates on Karen's SUV," Ramirez replied, his tone unusually tense. "Guess what? That vehicle is registered to a shell corporation, no owner, no traceable financials, completely clean. But here's the kicker. The corporation is connected to a real estate investment firm in Chicago. And guess who sits on their board?" Jason's stomach sank. "Tell me." "Councilman Reed." Jason gripped the steering wheel so hard it creaked. Reed wasn't just a councilman. He was the one who'd pushed through the zoning laws that had sparked Jason's entire fight with the HOA in the first place. "Ramirez," Jason said, voice hoarse. "You're telling me Karen's working for him?" "Not just him," Ramirez replied, his voice dropping even lower. "I think she's part of something bigger. Land grabs, forced buyouts, families driven out. And now they want your property because it's the last thing standing between them and a multi-million-dollar development project. You are never supposed to win, Jason. They need you gone." Jason's jaw clenched. Then they should have sent someone better. Before Ramirez could respond, the line clicked a sudden sharp beep, then silence. Jason frowned. "Ramirez? You there?" "Nothing." He checked the screen. Call failed. Sarah turned, her voice shaky. "Jason, why did the call drop?" Jason shook his head, unease crawling under his skin. "Because someone doesn't want us talking." Suddenly, headlights flared behind them, blinding and close too close. Jason squinted into the rearview mirror. A dark sedan, no plates, windows blacked out. Its engine roared like a predator closing in on prey. "Hold on," Jason barked, slamming his foot down on the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching against wet pavement. The sedan stayed glued to their bumper. "Jason!" Sarah screamed, bracing against the dashboard. Jason swerved hard around a bend, nearly clipping the guardrail, but the sedan matched every move perfectly. Then its headlights blinked once, twice, 3 times the signal. Before Jason could react, a second car exploded out of a side street ahead, cutting them off. Jason slammed the brakes, the truck fishtailing wildly before stopping inches from the second car's bumper. The first sedan skidded sideways, blocking their escape from behind. Jason and Sarah were boxed in. 2 men stepped out of the front car, wearing black tactical gear, the same kind Jason had seen in the woods. One of them carried a suppressed MP7, the other a crowbar. The second sedan's doors opened, revealing another 2 men. Jason's heart thundered, but his mind was razor sharp. He reached under his seat, grabbing the backup Glock he'd stashed months ago, and shoved a small revolver into Sarah's trembling hands. "Stay low," he whispered, "and if anyone gets close to you, don't hesitate." The men approached slowly, deliberately, boots splashing in puddles, rifles steady. One of them raised his hand, signaling Jason to step out. Jason opened the door halfway, gun hidden behind the frame. "You picked the wrong night," he growled. The man didn't reply. He just smiled a cold, lifeless smile, and then everything erupted at once. Jason dove sideways as bullets punched holes through the truck's windshield, glass spraying into the air. Sarah screamed, ducking beneath the dashboard as Jason fired 2 quick shots, dropping one of the attackers instantly. Another man charged, swinging the crowbar, but Jason slammed the truck door open, hitting him square in the chest and sending him sprawling into the mud. The other 2 men returned fire, forcing Jason to duck behind the hood for cover. Then out of nowhere, the roar of an engine thundered down the road. Blue and red lights exploded through the rain-soaked night. Ramirez's SUV skidded to a stop, and he jumped out, shotgun in hand. "Down!" Ramirez bellowed, blasting the nearest attacker off his feet. The remaining men scrambled, retreating back into their cars. Within seconds, Both sedans screeched away into the darkness, tires screaming, leaving behind the bodies of their fallen. Jason leaned against the truck, chest heaving, the rain mixing with blood on his arm from a graze wound. Ramirez approached, his face pale but furious. "They tapped my phone," Ramirez said between ragged breaths. "They knew I was coming." "Jason, this goes deeper than Karen. Reed's just a puppet." Jason wiped the rain from his face, staring into the empty road where the cars had vanished. "Then who's pulling the strings?" Ramirez hesitated, glancing at Sarah, then back at Jason. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Jason, it's someone in federal housing. We've been fighting the wrong battle." Lightning split the sky, illuminating Jason's grim expression. He knew now that this wasn't just about his property anymore. This was war. The storm had passed, but Jason's world was far from calm. Morning light filtered through heavy clouds as he sat on the porch of his battered farmhouse, watching mist rise from the drenched fields. The bullet holes in his truck, the blood-stained gravel, the shattered windows, all reminders of what happened just hours ago. Sarah slept inside, exhausted and trembling, while Ramirez leaned against the railing, sipping black coffee, his face lined with frustration. "Jason," Ramirez said finally, setting the mug down, "I dug deeper into those shell corporations last night. Reed's just a pawn. The real power sits higher, a developer named Victor Hale. He owns half the companies pushing these buyouts nationwide. But here's the catch." He paused, locking eyes with Jason. "Hale has federal protection. This isn't just about land. This is about billions, and the people protecting him will kill to keep their secrets buried." Jason clenched his fists, his knuckles pale. "So Karen, she was working for Hale?" Ramirez nodded. "Her HOA threats, the fake code violations, the intimidation, it's all part of his playbook. And when you didn't sell, they escalated. First harassment, then sabotage, now attempted murder." Jason's jaw tightened. "So we take it public. We expose Hale." Ramirez hesitated. "I tried, but here's the thing. Someone inside my department is feeding them information. Every time I move against Hale, his people know before I even file the paperwork. That ambush last night? It wasn't luck. Someone tipped them off." Jason felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Who?" Ramirez took a deep breath, his voice low and grim. "My captain." Jason froze. "You're telling me the man running this investigation is working for Hale?" "Yes," Ramirez said, his tone bitter. "And if we make one wrong move, Jason, we're dead. They'll burn this whole town before they let you keep your land." Before Jason could reply, Sarah appeared in the doorway, pale but determined. "Then we don't fight them their way," she said softly. "We make the world watch. We take this online, go public, expose everything, every threat, every attack, every name. If they want to silence us, they'll have to do it in the open." Ramirez frowned. "That's risky. If we misstep, Hale will spin the narrative, and we'll look like the criminals." Jason shook his head. "Not if we have proof." For the next 2 weeks, they worked in silence. Ramirez leaked confidential documents, financial trails, and recordings from Karen's HOA meetings. Sarah compiled every threatening email, every security camera clip, every timestamp call from Karen and her people. Jason spent sleepless nights building a digital wall of evidence, connecting the dots between Hale, Reed, the shell companies, and the federal housing insiders. Then one night, Jason uploaded the video. The title burned across the screen. "They tried to steal my home, now I'm exposing them all." Within 24 hours, it hit 3 million views. By day 3, national media picked it up. News anchors debated the corruption scandal on live television. Hashtags exploded. Journalists dug into Hale's past, uncovering more fraud, more evictions, more ruined families. But Hale wasn't finished. On the 4th night, Jason's security alarms tripped at 2:37 a.m. Cameras caught 3 masked men approaching his property, but this time Ramirez and 2 trusted deputies were waiting. Gunfire cracked through the night, and the attackers were captured alive. Under interrogation, one of them broke. "It's over," he said, shaking, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Hale ordered us to torch the house. Make it look like an accident. You weren't supposed to survive." 2 days later, Hale was arrested on charges of racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy. Reed resigned in disgrace. Karen fled the state and disappeared completely. The HOA dissolved. Jason's land was finally safe. But Jason knew better than to celebrate. Sitting on his porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, he whispered to Sarah, "This isn't just one battle. There are more Hales out there, more families getting crushed every day. If we don't keep fighting, they'll just move on to the next target." Ramirez joined them, setting down a stack of papers. New complaints from homeowners across the country who'd seen Jason's video and reached out for help. Jason looked at the pile, then at Ramirez and Sarah. "We're not done," he said quietly. "We're just getting started." He turned toward the camera mounted on his porch, the red recording light blinking softly, and spoke directly to it for the first time since this all began. If you've ever been threatened, harassed, or pushed off your land by greedy corporations or corrupt HOAs, speak up, share your story. Let's build something they can't silence. Together we can stop them. He paused, took a deep breath, and added one final line. "Because if we stay quiet, they win."